Happy Easter, dear friends and guests. It is so good to be together today. There is a Zen story about a monk who was known far and wide for his laughter. Not a giggle, not a chuckle, a fully embodied, from the belly, unstoppable kind of laughter. He would sit under a tree, eyes closed in meditation, and begin to laugh as if he had just heard the funniest thing in the world. Other monks were baffled. "Doesn't he know the world is full of suffering?" they whispered. "How can he laugh while everything falls apart?" A traveler asked him directly, "How can you be joyful in a world like this?" The monk smiled and said, "That's precisely why I laugh, because the world is broken and beautiful. Because everything changes and yet the birds still sing. Joy is not a denial of suffering. It is a refusal to let suffering have the final word." Strip away all the pomp and circumstance of Easter, and we discover a tenacious truth raising its voice. Sometimes it whispers with a sly smile, other times a full-hearted laugh emerging from the shadows of despair and death. There is still more to this story. A stone once immovable scratches its way aside. The light returns. Life breathes again. Some spaciousness insists upon itself, and we emerge to find a way forward. For some of us right now, this is a daily process. Tables so established, impenetrable, suddenly get flipped. Tables demanding us to sit and be quiet and consume a meal called "that's just the way the world works" are suddenly turned over. And a newer, wider table is set, a healthier feast before us and before those once excluded. On Good Friday, such a scenario hangs before the women, the only followers of Jesus not to flee as he is hanged upon a cross. A moment, Barbara Brown Taylor reminds, that happens not because of atheism and anarchy, but because of law and order allied with religion, which is always a deadly mix. The question before them: can loveless power silence and bury powerless love? The cross was Rome's answer in the affirmative, its rebellion against loving truth, its brutal exclamation point on any threat to its power, or any who stirs the powerless to remember their true power. Friday, Saturday, then Sunday smiles. Unflappable love laughs, flipping that exclamation point on its side, chopping it up into an ellipsis of possibility. There is still more to this story. The resurrection of Jesus points not merely to a singular moment in time, but to a deeper, universal reality true of all times. A pattern, if you will, woven into life's fabric. The women run from the tomb with awe and great joy, becoming the first preachers of this improbable good news. May we never forget the Jesus story is her story. Yet, as they eventually encounter the risen one, the scars of crucifixion, the wounds, the empire unjustly inflicted upon Jesus' body remain. Easter is not a denial of suffering, but of new life's insistence on another word. New life pushing its way out of the hardest ground, writing a new story from the ashes. Easter is not a denial of death's finality either, or a minimizing of its bitter realities. But insofar as Jesus reveals this loving heart of God, Easter reveals that we are radically accompanied within and through our suffering. and every loss. I struggled with this message this week. In a chaotic Good Friday world, how can we speak of Easter? How can we be joyful when everything is falling apart, as our democracy is collapsing? I want desperately to avoid anything that smacks of spiritual bypassing and give space and shelter to the fears, the griefs, the anxieties this time is inspiring. This time of open tombs and mass burials and the upturned soil of sun-drenched graves, as a chaplain colleague wrote this week. This time of climate catastrophe and our insistence on the domination of human life over earth and sea life and plant and animal life. This time of our government disappearing humans without due process, getting away with it because of years of dehumanizing people as illegals and animals. Naval leaders banning books about Black history and the Holocaust, all while claiming to fight anti-Semitism. The erasure of archives, the control of universities, the censoring of museums. These are not merely administrative acts. These are spiritual acts, rituals of amnesia, signaling, as Reverend Cameron Trimble writes, a system built on white supremacy that can no longer tolerate the truth of its own origins. They are desperate attempts to guard a single fragile story, a story where some always belonged and others never have. It is a story polished to look like virtue, with a veneer of Christianity, but it is rooted in conquest, exclusion, and fear. Under a tree I sat this week and heard the question again, how can we be joyful in a world like this? Under the trees that the powers that be turn into crosses, we wonder, how can we sing of Easter still? But then, a stubborn smile stretched itself across my face. Because we refuse to let all of this have the final word. There is more to this story. Amid grief and dismay, 60 of us gathered around tables on Thursday to share a meal where poignant reminders abounded that we are not alone. Our hugs were tighter and longer, saying 1,000 words in a single embrace, and then 1,000 more words were offered in a bowl of soup and bread. As some of us consider self-deportation and wonder about our asylum status, wondering how long we'll be able to access gender-affirming health care, someone said to me, I know this isn't the end of my story here in the United States. As we shared the communion meal that night, Reverend Laura, Reverend Chad, and I had to laugh together because what is often a solemn, introspective occasion turned into this joyful party. Poignant reminders abounded how much we need each other, how we hold each other through our Good Fridays, and become for each other the embodied hope of Easter Sunday. On Friday, at our Stations of the Cross and Labyrinth Walk, a man came in who had just been released from prison after 30 years. That man is sitting among us here today. He was first notified of his parole hearing last year on Good Friday and swore he'd come to find a church in which to be on this Good Friday. He shared with me how that day is so good to him because it will forever be associated with his freedom. This man is imagining life again, a witness to the truth, as James Baldwin said it, that sometimes our tombs become wombs, giving birth to some new life once thought impossible. As I walked through our building before leaving, I heard the faint but unmistakable applause and cheers from downstairs. It was coming from one of our recovery groups that meets here weekly, celebrating their sober anniversaries. Yesterday, a group of 25 of you planted trees that will be harvestable from the streets, and over 60 native pollinators and plants and vegetables, the next major build-out of our community gardens and urban farms here at the cathedral, as we continue sharing food with our beloved neighbors. You'll hear more about this in just a few moments. How can we speak and sing of Easter still? How can we not? It is here, among us, within us. The early followers of the way called Jesus the first fruits of the resurrection, the first fruits of a much greater harvest, a pattern sown into the ground of life in which new life emerges from death. We speak and sing of Easter because we remember well that truth is also a seed that can only remain buried so long. To tell the truth in a culture of incessant lying and deception and alternative facts is a revolutionary act, an Easter act that insists truth have the final say. And let us never forget, truth is so resilient. It hides in our songs, in our stories, in our sacred texts, and in the sights of our lives. It lives in the memories our ancestors whispered and in the bodies of those still rising. Even when suppressed, truth becomes compost, feeding new generations who refuse to forget. So please keep speaking up and speaking out. Love rejoices in the truth. We embody Easter when we, like Eddie Hilsum, a Dutch Jew who, leading up to the years before her murder at Auschwitz, tenaciously refused to abandon herself, though surrounded by untold misery and death. She wrote in her journal, "It is sometimes hard to take in and comprehend, O God, what those created in your likeness do to each other in these disjointed days. And yet," she continues, "I love people so terribly because in every human I love something of you, O God. And I seek you everywhere in them and often do find something of you." She goes on to pray, and that is all we can manage these days, and also all that really matters, that we safeguard that piece of you, God, in ourselves. We must help you and defend your dwelling place inside all of us to the last. When Eddie and her family were on the train platform to be deported to Poland in 1943, following some 700,000 Jewish, Roma, Black, disabled, and LGBTQ kin who'd been deported from Holland before them, a dear friend observed Eddie, quote, talking happily, smiling, a kind word for everyone she met on the way, full of sparkling humor, perhaps just a touch of sadness, but every inch of the Eddie you all know so well. We embody new life and embody resistance when we refuse to abandon ourselves and instead harness love's enduring presence in the shadows of death. A newer world is only possible when we embody it, when we live into it, refusing to return violence for violence, refusing to lay ourselves upon hatred's table and giving in and over to it, only to be consumed. This is Good Friday and Easter, this shocking turn of table with an unexpected answer to the question, can loveless power silence and bury powerless love? It is how Jesus can say to those grieving, those tyrannized, those excluded, blessed or happy are you. To those who are merciful, gentle, laboring for peace, hungering for justice, happy are you. Happy are you. While there are future promises that follow these odd blessings, promises of heaven, Jesus is also describing a present reality. Happy are you right now because you are seen. You are known, you are heard, your story is important. It matters, it can't be erased, as much as people are trying to erase it. This is the ultimate turn of table from which every other teaching of Jesus flows, a present truth that the least likely candidates are revealed to be most fortunate in the divine economy of things. Jesus, I think, invites us to join that divine dance in co-creating a world with this topsy-turvy truth, where it is more deeply realized and embodied now. Our helping God, to echo Eddie, defend the dignity and dwelling place of the holy in all of us, the least, the last, and the lost. Our refusal not only to abandon ourselves and others is finally a refusal to surrender our joy. And joy is not escapism. It is spiritual resistance. As the late Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, sometimes your joy is the source of your smile, but sometimes your smile can be the source of your joy. In other words, we can choose joy, not to deny or ignore the pains of the world, but to remind ourselves what is still worth fighting for. There is still more to this story. Joy reminds us that we are alive, that love still endures amid the unendurable, that beauty still surprises, and that amid the chaotic uncertainties, we are still capable of great awe and delight and even laughter. Laughter, that thing which Anne Lamott called carbonated holiness. So rise up each day and let joy have a say. May it rise in you like the morning sun. Be joyful, says Rendell Berry, even though you have considered all the facts. Love wins because love has won. Amen.